We'll continue now with our introduction to the Avodas Yom Kippurim, and more precisely to our overview of the Seder of Avodas Yom Kippurim. And the last thing that we mentioned was that following the Hotzas HaYimurim of the Par and the Soyer, the Kohen Gadol would send the Par and the Soyer Chutz L'Shalosh Machnos to the Beis Hadeshen. There it would be burnt, and then he would come and read the Torah in the Ezras Noshim. The burning of the Par and the Soyer took place in the Beis Hadeshen. And then once the Kohen Gadol got the sign that the Soyer Lazaza reached the Midbar, at that point he went out to the Ezras Noshim, as we said before, and he read the parashas of the day. Now the Torah says the following. In Parashas Achrimos it says, Uba Aaron el ol moed, upashat es bigdei abad shel lavash b'voel hakodesh v'nicham sham. And the Chachamim say that when it says Uba Aaron, it's not referring to the Heichal, but rather Lifnai v'Lifnim. And he enters into the Kodesh Kodshim. What he does at this point is he removes the kaf and the machta of the Ketores that he left there. He wouldn't leave it there because then he wasn't allowed to go back in until a year from now. So he didn't want to leave the kaf and the machta inside the Kodesh Kodshim. So he went back in order to remove the kaf and the machta of Ketores. Chachamim say that this pasuk is really out of order. Shelo ala seder, and this is because lefi shekiblu chachamim aloch leMoshe miSinai, there was an oral tradition shechamesh tvilos vasar kiddushin, that 5 times during the course of Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol immersed himself in the mikvah, and each one of those immersions, each one of those tefillos required a Kiddush Yadayim before and a Kiddush Yadayim afterwards, doubling the number from 5 to 10. Now, the tefillos of this day of Yom Kippur are always connected to and generated by what we call hachlofas chiluf begadim, when he changes his begadim, either from Big Day Chol to Big Day Kodesh, Big Day Kahuna, or from Big Day Kahuna to Big Day Lavan to Big Day Zav, or the reverse. Whenever he changes his begadim, he needs a tefillah, and we find that 5 times he changes his begadim. Thus, we derive 5 tefillos. Now, if we would take this pasuk, Kisidron, in its sequence, the way you read it at face value, then we would come to the conclusion that the Kohen Gadol only changes his begadim 3 times. He goes from Big Day Chol to Big Day Zav, for the purpose of being makriv the Tamid and the Musafim. Then, when he does the Avodas Hayom, he takes off his Big Day Zav and he puts on his Big Day Love, and that's the 2nd time he changes his begadim. And now he takes out the kaf and the machta, and now he's ready to change his Big Day Love into Big Day Zav, for the purpose of the rest of the karbanos that are part of the Avodas Hayom, that are not unique to Yom Kippurim, but they're Avodah of the entire year. So the Chachamim were in a bind of it. They had to come up with some way that there was an extra chiluf begadim. So what did they say? They determined that there's another time that the Kohen Gadol is going to go into the Kodesh Kodshim, And that's for the purpose of taking out the kaf and the machta. And once again, since this is an avoda that's unique to Yom Kippurim, and he's going into the Kodesh Kodshim, he's going to change his big day zav and don big day lavan. Therefore, the Chachamim say that this hotzas kafu machta is not in its proper order, meaning after he does the haktar victores, then he takes out the kaf and the machta, because again that would reduce his chiluk begodim to the number 3. But rather he's going to do this hotzas kaf and machta later on, in the middle of some other hakrava of other karbanos that are not unique to Yom Kippurim, that are implemented while the Kohen Gadol is wearing big day zav. So he's going to take a break at some point in the sequence of those avodos, and he's going to take off his big day zav to wear his big day lavan and go into the Kodesh Kodshim for the purpose of hotzas kafu machta. Now we jack up his hachlafas gadim by adding another 2. He's going to take off his big day zav in order to achieve hotzas kaf machta inside the Kodesh Kodshim. He's wearing his big day lavan. He comes out of the Kodesh Kodshim, and now he continues the avoda, which is not unique to the day of Yom Kippur, and he takes off his big day lavan and puts on his big day zav, and that adds another 2 chilufei gadim, which, as we said before, parallels the 5 tfilos, and we double them with regard to Kiddush Yadayim. Next, he's wearing his big day zav to continue the avodos that are not unique to Yom Kippurim. That's called shar avodos. He does a tefillah to take off his big day bad, his big day lavan, and put on his big day zav. He does 2 kiddushim in the kiyar yadayim raglayim, and the sequence of shar avodos on Yom Kippurim isn't identical to the sequence the whole year round, because these avodos, by and large, are not mentioned at all in Parshas Achremos, and therefore the din of seder of avodas hayom does not apply to these avodos because they're not incorporated in Parshas Achremos. For example, there's a hakrova called Elo Shel Kohen Gadol. There's also, well, it depends on the machlokas tanoim, but there's also an additional aisle that's brought as part of the musafim. Now, the strange thing is that these musafim are brought the whole year round, meaning on any Shabbos, any Yom Tov, and Yom Kippur doesn't fall shy. And therefore, Yom Kippur itself, as a Yom Kadosh, would engender a chiyuv of the El HaMusafim. But yet, the Torah explicitly incorporates the El HaMusafim in Parshas Achremos. Therefore, by taking Ayil and placing it into Achremos, the Torah is teaching us that it's going to be part of the Seder Avodas Yom Kippurim. The Seder Avodas Yom Kippurim is ideal. It's lechatchila. It's not likuva. And the reason for that is because the avodah of the El HaMusafim, even though that carbon is mentioned in Parashas Achremos, and even though it's part of the Seder Avodah of Yom Kippurim, nevertheless, it's going to be implemented when the Kohen Gadol is wearing big day zav, because it's part of the Musafim, and insofar as it's part of the Musafim, it's considered Shar Avodos, and Shar Avodos are always implemented and achieved while he's wearing big day zav. So what we're going to do now, as a kind of summary, or if you want to call it the bottom line of what we've been doing the last couple of days in organizing the Seder Hayom of Yom Kippurim, we're going to suggest the Rambam, present the Rambam Seder Hayom in the fourth parak of Avodas Yom Kippurim. Number one, V'rachatz es b'sara b'mayim v'makom kadosh v'lavash es b'gadav v'yatsa. So first, the Kohen Gadol is going to immerse himself in a mikvah. He's going to change his begadim from Big Day Chol to wear Big Day Zav. And then he begins with the Tamid, as we say. So he did the Tamid, he did the Musafim, and Shchitas Hakrovas Seir HaMusafim, and the time is ripe for the Hakrova now of the Seir HaMusafim, because the Torah in the Parsha of Musaf, in Parshas Pinchas, at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, writes, Milvad Chatos HaKippurim. What does that mean, Milvad Chatos HaKippurim? It means immediately after the Chatas HaKippurim. So we have the Sa'ir, that's a Sa'ir Bifnim, the Sa'ir Shanasa Bifnim, and then we're ready for the Akrava of the Musaf, the Sa'ir of Musaf. Then the Kohen Gadol will now be makriv his aisle plus the aisle of Musafim, and the aisle of the Musaf will be accompanied by Minchas Nesachim, and that's true for every Musaf. And the pasuk says, "V'yasas olasov v'yasolas ha'am v'chiper ba'ado u'biyad ha'am." Now we're ready for the emurim, haktaras emurim of the par pnimi, and the soyer sha'ol Hashem. Right, he had the gorol, and now he takes the soyer that's lazazel, and he sends it in the hands of the shliach. Hamashaleach es hasair lazazel yichabes gadav. V'chatzes b'saro b'mayim v'achrechein yovel amachne v'eis parachatos v'eis seirachatos asher huva es damam lechaper b'kodesh yotzi al michutz amachne v'sorfo b'eish es ol rosam es b'sorim es pirsh. So we had the entire process of hazah of the parchatos and the soyer lachatos separately inside the Kodesh Kodshim, in the Heichal, outside the Kodesh Kodshim, after they're mixed together, outside the Kodesh Kodshim, etc., etc. And now we're ready for Hotzal Lechutz of the Par and the Soyer. And that's going to be taken out and burnt in the Beis HaDeshen. As so Reifosam, the Torah tells us about the person who is in charge of burning the Par Chatos and the Soyer Chatos, is Yichabes B'Kadav, he himself becomes Tamei V'Chatz B'Sora B'Mayim V'Achrechein Yovel Amachne, and the Chachamim say that these psukim were said Shalom Al HaSeder, that the burning of the Par and the Soyer already had taken place earlier, at the time of Kriyas HaTorah, and that's based on a hekesh. It says V'asoreif in the context of Sreifas HaPar V'asoyer, and it says Hamashaleach with regard to Shiluach HaSoyer L'Azazel, and we derive from this hekesh that Ma Hamashaleach Hainu Hamashaleach Sha'asak Bo L'Mayla, meaning the Shiluach that we had mentioned earlier. And now the pasuk is repeating itself, like a person who sometimes stops in the middle and then goes back to where he left off, is af hasorev shalamal. Now the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim has to be brought, and The question is, what comes first, the Tamid Shel Ben Arbayim or the Hotzas Kaf Umachta? He says that Oyamakriv is Korban Atomid Ata velo liachar Hotzas Kaf Umachta Lefisha Mitzvah Shisharu Klei Aktores Bekodesh Kadoshim Zman Rav Kichol Efshari. We want to delay removal of the kaf and the machta, the klei aktoris, from the Kodesh Kodashim, as long as possible. Keep delaying. And therefore, we're going to bring the dam of the tamid of Ben Arbayim before we go into the Kodesh Kodashim to remove the kaf and the machta. Now I'm curious to know, why is it that we want to leave the kaf and machta in the Kodesh Kodashim as long as possible? Why delay its removal? I can't figure that one out. Hotzas kaf and machta, the big day Lavan, right? He goes into the Kodesh Kodashim. This is the continuation of the Ketores. He takes out the kaf and machta, and he's wearing big day Lavan. Now he comes out, he does another tefillah, another 2 kiddushim, and then the pasuk says, "Uba Aaron el moed upasha despik de abad ashalovash bebo el hakodesh v'nicham sham," and never b'pasuk zeh shalo al haseder. As we said before, when the Torah says that he goes in to take the kaf u'machta, that's not the sequence of it, because otherwise we'd be short 2 tefillos. Torres v'neros shel bein harbayim the big days up. Right, the Torres was brought twice a day the whole year round, so that's not an avoda of Yom Kippurim. And now, when the Kohen Gadol has come out of the Kodesh Kodashim after he takes out the kaf machta, and he's about to do the avodas haktores of Bein Arbayim of every day, he has to change his blood from big day bad to wear big day zav. And once again, he needs another tefillah, 2 kiddushim, takes off his big day kodesh, and he's ready for the last kiddush. When he finishes all his avodos, after he's burnt the ketores, and he was madlik the neiros of Bein Arbayim, now he's ready to take off his gadim, big day zav, and he wears big day chol, and he goes home. That's it for the day. And Yontif v'ya'osa b'tzeisa b'shalom ben HaKodesh, Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, Ashrei ha'am sh'Hashem elokim. Now, at this point, I would like to suggest, going forward next week, that we choose either Zvachim or Menachos for the Hakdam, for the overview and introduction to Kodshim. For example, I have here in front of me a very fine introduction to Zvachim from Rav Shlomo Katz. You remember the Sefer, Nefesh Tov. Actually, I took the license of borrowing this Sefer from good old Don Shransky. So this is your Sefer. So you'll have to come back to the LC to reclaim it. In any event, at the beginning of this Sefer, Rav Katz has a description in the name of the Brisker Rav of what's called Machsheves Shalol Lishma, which is a very important introduction to Kodshim. The Mishnah says at the beginning of Zvachim, Kol HaZvachim Shenizbechu Shalol Lishman Ksherim El Shalol Olu Lebailim L'Shem Chov. And Rashi there says that Shalol Lishman means that he shechted a carbon olam L'Shem Shlam. And yet the Mishnah says that the carbon is kosher. Again, I don't know why Rashi had to say that he shechted the carbon l'shem shlamim. Now Rashi could have just said shalom l'shma. That he didn't shech l'shem olam. It doesn't mean that he have to have his mind a different carbon. And the Brisker Rav is going to say that in the Shman Karbanos there are two different dinim. So that's something that we might, consider learning as an introduction and incorporate into introduction to Kodshim. And it would make sense that as an introduction to Zvachim, Masechet Zvachim, which is the most important Masechet Zvachim in Kodshim, that's where we might continue our introduction. Is also an introduction to Menachos, and Menachos is a world unto itself. That's another option. So if you don't mind, you put the ball in my court, and I'll make that decision. Hopefully, you'll be happy with my decision as to how we proceed in terms of our overview.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I see the whiteboard behind you. Are you in the kollel?
Yes.
Are there people there with you?
Or the kollel is up and running. They're all green. Rabbi Myers is here. Rabbi Dumas is here. You'll recognize a lot of familiar faces. And today was my trial. And Mirza Hashem, I'm hoping that here on in,